Sit back, relax, and welcome to Reading Hours. Today's book is Hamlet by William Shakespeare. Please let us know in the comments from where you are watching, or if there is a book you want us to summarize in future. A bitter wind howls over the towering walls of Elsinore Castle as midnight approaches. The Danish royal fortress stands against the dark sky, its stone battlements cloaked in cold mist. A lone sentry, Francisco, paces back and forth, gripping his weapon tightly. The night is eerily silent, but an unease lingers in the air, as if something unnatural has disturbed the peace. Soon, another guard, Bernardo, arrives to relieve Francisco of his post. Yet Francisco's face is tense, his eyes darting to the shadows. "For this relief, much thanks," he mutters, but his voice lacks conviction. As he departs, two more figures emerge: Marcellus, another officer, and Horatio, a scholar and close friend of Prince Hamlet. Marcellus and Bernardo have been troubled by something for the past 2 nights, and they have called upon Horatio to witness it for himself. Horatio is skeptical at first. "Tush, tush, 'twill not appear," he dismisses their concerns. He is a man of reason, a thinker who places his faith in logic rather than superstition. But before he can speak further, a shadow stirs at the edge of the battlements. A figure emerges from the mist, silent, ghostly, its armor shimmering faintly in the moonlight. The 3 men freeze in terror. The ghost stands before them, unmistakably the image of the late King Hamlet, who died only weeks ago. Horatio's skepticism shatters. He watches in stunned silence as the ghost lingers for a moment, then vanishes just as suddenly as it appeared. The men exchange uneasy glances, their breaths shallow with fear. If the spirit of Denmark's former king walks the earth, it can only mean one thing: some great misfortune is upon them. Horatio recalls the history of Rome, when the dead were said to rise before the fall of Julius Caesar. Could such a fate be awaiting Denmark? As the night deepens, they agree on one course of action: Prince Hamlet must be told. If the ghost walks the castle walls for a reason, it may reveal its purpose to the late king's son. Elsewhere within Elsinore, a very different scene unfolds. In the great hall, King Claudius addresses the royal court. He sits upon the throne now, ruling Denmark in his late brother's place. Beside him sits Queen Gertrude, Hamlet's mother, who has hastily remarried Claudius in the wake of her husband's death. The wedding followed so quickly after the funeral that it has caused whispers of scandal throughout the court. Claudius speaks in measured tones, attempting to balance diplomacy with an air of authority. He acknowledges the sorrow of his brother's passing, but insists that Denmark must move forward. He turns to matters of state, addressing the recent threat posed by young Fortinbras of Norway. The prince seeks to reclaim the lands his father lost to King Hamlet years before. To counter this, Claudius dispatches ambassadors to Norway, hoping to quash Fortinbras's ambitions through diplomatic means. His words seem carefully rehearsed, polished to convey strength, but there is something forced about them. The court listens, yet beneath the surface, tension lingers. And then Claudius turns his attention to Hamlet. The young prince stands apart from the assembly, his face shadowed with grief. His father is barely in the grave, yet here stands Claudius, wearing the crown that should have passed to him. Worse still, his mother has not only accepted Claudius as king, but has taken him as her new husband. To Hamlet, it is unthinkable. How could she forget his father so quickly? How could she exchange a great and noble king for this man, this impostor? Claudius addresses him directly, attempting a delicate balance between command and persuasion. He chastises Hamlet for his prolonged mourning, calling it unmanly and excessive. "Your father lost a father," Claudius reminds him, "and that father lost his." Death, he argues, is a natural part of life. Hamlet must learn to accept it. He urges him to see him as a father figure, to remain at Elsinore rather than return to Wittenberg, where he had been studying. Gertrude, too, pleads with him to stay. "Do not forever with thy veiled lids seek for thy noble father in the dust," she implores, hoping he will put aside his grief. Hamlet says little, keeping his thoughts guarded. But beneath the surface, his blood boils. His mother's words sting like a betrayal. His uncle's presence on the throne disgusts him. His father's death, sudden and unexplained, gnaws at his heart like a festering wound. As the court disperses, Hamlet remains behind. Alone, his inner turmoil erupts in a searing soliloquy. He contemplates the unbearable weight of his grief, wishing that his flesh might melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew. The world seems foul to him, an unweeded garden overgrown with corruption. And at the heart of that corruption is his mother, whose actions have shattered his trust. "Frailty, thy name is woman," he declares bitterly. He cannot comprehend how she could go from mourning to marriage in a matter of weeks. It is unnatural, obscene, and yet no one else seems to question it. But Hamlet's despair is interrupted when Horatio arrives, bringing grave news. The ghost of his father has been seen walking the battlements. Hamlet's breath catches in his throat. A ghost, his father's spirit. What could this mean? His mind races with questions, possibilities. If his father walks the earth, then something must be deeply, terribly wrong. Determined to find the truth, Hamlet demands to see the ghost for himself. That night, he joins the watchmen on the cold battlements, waiting in tense anticipation. Midnight strikes, and the wind howls through the fortress. Then, through the shifting mist, the figure emerges once more. It is his father. Hamlet stares, his heart pounding. The ghost gazes back at him and gestures for him to follow. Horatio and the others urge caution. What if it leads him to danger? What if it is a trick, a demon in disguise? But Hamlet is resolute. If his father's spirit has returned from the grave, it must be for a reason. Without hesitation, he follows the ghost into the darkness, stepping toward a truth that will change everything. The night air is thick with tension as Hamlet follows the ghostly figure of his father away from the battlements. His heart pounds, his breath quickens, but he does not hesitate. Horatio and Marcellus call after him, fearing for his safety, but he silences them with a wave of his hand. The ghost has chosen to speak to him alone. It leads him further into the darkness until they are away from prying eyes. Then, at last, it stops and turns to face him. The ghost's voice is heavy with sorrow and fury. It reveals a terrible truth. Hamlet's father did not die of natural causes, as the kingdom was led to believe. He was murdered. "Murder most foul," the ghost declares, its voice filled with anguish. And the killer? None other than Claudius, the man who now wears the crown and shares a bed with Gertrude. Hamlet is frozen, his mind reeling. Murder, Claudius? The thought is too monstrous to bear, yet the ghost's words ring with undeniable truth. It recounts how Claudius crept into the king's orchard one afternoon while he slept. There, the traitor poured a vile poison into his ear, a substance so potent that it curdled his blood and left his body marred with unnatural sores. The king died in his sleep, robbed of the chance for confession, his soul left unshriven. And as his body was laid to rest, Claudius seized the throne and seduced Gertrude, wrapping Denmark in a web of corruption and deceit. The ghost's voice grows urgent, commanding Hamlet to avenge this foul crime. Let not the royal bed of Denmark be a couch for luxury and damned incest, it warns. Justice must be served. But Hamlet is also given a warning. Gertrude, though guilty of betrayal, is to be left to heaven's judgment. The ghost's anger is reserved for Claudius alone. As the first light of dawn threatens to break over the horizon, the ghost begins to fade. Remember me, it pleads, its final words hanging in the cold air, and then it is gone. Hamlet stands alone in the silence, his body trembling. He grips his head, overwhelmed by what he has just learned. His uncle a murderer, his father a restless spirit calling for vengeance, his mother a willing accomplice or a blind fool. His entire world has been upended in an instant. But amid his grief and fury, a new resolve hardens within him. He swears an oath. He will not rest until justice is done. Moments later, Horatio and Marcellus find him, their faces filled with concern. Hamlet, still shaken, refuses to tell them exactly what the ghost revealed. But he does make them swear one thing. No matter what strange behavior they may witness from him in the coming days, they must remain silent. They must tell no one what they have seen that night. The ghost's voice seems to echo from the shadows, commanding them to swear. With hands pressed to Hamlet's sword, they take the oath. As the first hints of daylight creep over Elsinore, Hamlet's mind is already racing. He cannot simply strike Claudius down in the open. He must be certain, he must find proof. And so, a plan begins to form. He will not reveal his knowledge outright. Instead, he will feign madness, clouding himself in an air of unpredictability. If he is to move against the king, he must first gather the evidence he needs. Meanwhile, in another part of the castle, a different scheme is unfolding. Polonius, the king's chief advisor, is a man who delights in intrigue, and his family is not immune to his meddling. His son, Laertes, is preparing to leave for France, and before he departs, he offers words of advice to his sister, Ophelia. He warns her against falling for Hamlet's affections, arguing that the prince's love is fleeting, and that, as a royal, he is bound by duty more than desire. Ophelia listens, but before she can respond, their father enters. Polonius echoes Laertes' warnings, but in far harsher terms. He demands to know what has passed between her and Hamlet. Ophelia, reluctant to speak, admits that the prince has made vows of love to her. Polonius scoffs, dismissing Hamlet's words as empty deceptions. Do not believe his vows, he commands, forbidding her from seeing him again. Ophelia, though hesitant, promises to obey. But Hamlet's strange behavior soon begins to unsettle the court. He wanders Elsinore like a man possessed, his clothes disheveled, his eyes wide with some unknown torment. One day, he appears before Ophelia in a state of wild distress. He grabs her wrist, stares at her with hollow eyes, and then abruptly leaves without speaking a word. Shaken, Ophelia rushes to her father, who immediately jumps to conclusions. Hamlet's madness must be the result of unrequited love. Polonius, ever eager to ingratiate himself with Claudius, takes this theory to the king and queen. He tells them that Hamlet's strange behavior stems from his love for Ophelia and her rejection of him. Claudius, though intrigued, is not entirely convinced. Gertrude, however, clings to the explanation. She, too, has noticed the change in her son, and the idea that love might be the cause is far easier to accept than the possibility of something darker. Polonius devises a plan to test his theory. Ophelia will meet with Hamlet, while while he and Claudius watch in secret. If Hamlet reveals his love for her, then they will have their answer. If not, then his madness must have another cause. At the same time, Claudius calls upon two of Hamlet's old schoolmates, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. They are summoned to Elsinore under the pretense of visiting their friend, but their true purpose is to spy on him. Claudius hopes that they, as familiar faces, might be able to uncover the reason behind Hamlet's erratic behavior. As these plans take shape, Hamlet himself continues to struggle under the weight of his knowledge. He knows the truth, yet he is trapped in a world where he must hide it. He is surrounded by spies, by false friends, by a mother who has betrayed his father's memory. Every moment spent in the halls of Elsinore is a torment, but an opportunity soon presents itself, an opportunity to test Claudius's guilt. A group of traveling players arrives at the castle, seeking to perform before the court. An idea strikes Hamlet, one so perfect it feels like fate. He will have the players perform a scene that mirrors his father's murder, a play within a play. If Claudius reacts with guilt, it will be the proof Hamlet needs. As the sun sets over Elsinore, Hamlet's plan begins to take shape. The stage is set, the trap is laid, and soon, the truth will be revealed. The halls of Elsinore are restless, filled with whispers and unseen eyes. Hamlet, ever watchful, senses the noose tightening around him. Spies lurk in every corridor Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, once his childhood friends, now serve Claudius, their every word laced with deceit. But Hamlet does not confront them outright. Instead, he toys with them, feigning madness, offering riddles in place of answers. When they ask why he seems troubled, he muses on the nature of man, his voice laced with irony. "What a piece of work is man," he declares. "How noble in reason, how infinite in faculty. Yet, despite all these supposed virtues, man is nothing more to him than a quintessence of dust." His words leave his false friends uneasy, uncertain whether his melancholy is genuine or merely another layer of his performance. But Hamlet has no time to dwell on Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. His true focus lies elsewhere. That night, the players will perform the murder of Gonzago, but with a crucial addition. Hamlet has rewritten parts of the play to mirror the ghost's account of his father's murder. If Claudius watches an actor pour poison into a sleeping king's ear and reacts with guilt, Hamlet will have his proof. Before the performance, Hamlet has an unexpected encounter with Ophelia. The meeting is no accident. Polonius and Claudius have orchestrated it, hoping to uncover the cause of Hamlet's madness. Unaware that they are being watched, Ophelia approaches Hamlet, her eyes filled with sorrow. She attempts to return the letters he once gave her, a gesture meant to sever their bond. But Hamlet's mind is already consumed by doubt, by paranoia. His father's ghost has revealed treachery at the highest level of the court. Who is to say Ophelia has not been enlisted against him as well? His words, at first tender, quickly turn to scorn. "Are you honest?" he asks suddenly, searching her face for deception. "Are you fair?" Ophelia, taken aback, insists that she is, but Hamlet presses on, his tone growing more bitter. "Get thee to a nunnery," he tells her. It is both an insult and a plea. If she is as virtuous as she claims, she should retreat from this world of corruption before it taints her. But if she is playing a role in the court's schemes, then she is as guilty as the rest. Ophelia is heartbroken, unable to comprehend the sudden cruelty in his words. When he leaves, she collapses in grief. "Oh, what a noble mind is here o'erthrown," she laments. "The man she loved, the prince whose wit and brilliance once shone like a beacon has been reduced to a shadow of himself. Meanwhile, Claudius has observed everything, and while Polonius remains convinced that Hamlet's madness stems from rejected love, Claudius is no longer so sure. He has seen something in Hamlet's eyes, a danger, a sharpness that suggests more than simple heartbreak. He resolves to act. He will send Hamlet away to England, far from Elsinore, far from the threats he cannot yet name. But Hamlet remains one step ahead. As night falls, the court gathers for the play. The air in the great hall is thick with tension. Hamlet moves through the crowd, speaking with an unsettling playfulness. He sits beside Gertrude and makes crude, suggestive remarks, a clear jab at her marriage to Claudius. But his true focus remains on the king. The lights dim, the players take their places, and the performance begins. At first, the court watches with idle amusement. The play tells the tale of a royal couple, the Duke and Duchess. The Duke is kind and noble, deeply loved by his wife, until treachery enters their home. The Duchess's new lover pours poison into the sleeping Duke's ear, killing him in his bed. The act is swift, silent, treacherous. Hamlet's eyes never leave Claudius. The king watches, his expression carefully neutral. But then, the play continues. Hamlet's rewritten lines add a damning detail. The poisoner seduces the grieving widow, taking both her and the throne for himself. Claudius stirs in his seat. His breathing quickens. His hands clench the armrests of his chair. And then, suddenly, he can bear no more. He rises abruptly. "Give me some light," he commands, his voice sharp with panic. The play stops. The room falls into stunned silence. Claudius staggers away, exiting before anyone can question him. Hamlet exhales. He has his answer. Claudius's reaction is proof enough. His guilt is real. Horatio, who has also been watching closely, confirms it. The king's face, his movements, the way he paled at the sight of the murder, it was as clear a confession as any spoken word. Hamlet is elated, almost giddy with the thrill of revelation. "Would not this get me a fellowship and a cry of players?" he laughs, mocking the court's blindness. But his triumph is short-lived. For Claudius, shaken by the play, wastes no time in taking action. The mask has slipped, and he knows now that Hamlet sees through him. The prince is no longer merely a grieving son or a love-struck youth. He is a threat. As Hamlet revels in his victory, Claudius retreats to his private chapel. He falls to his knees, wrestling with his conscience. "Oh, my offense is rank," he confesses aloud. He knows what he has done. He has killed his own brother, stolen his crown, married his widow. The weight of his sin is suffocating. He longs to pray, to beg for forgiveness, but he cannot. How can he ask for absolution when he still reaps the rewards of his crime? "My words fly up, my thoughts remain below," he laments. His prayers are empty, his soul still stained with guilt. But unbeknownst to him, he is not alone. Hamlet has come, creeping silently through the darkness, a dagger in hand. He stands in the doorway of the chapel, watching Claudius kneel. His heart pounds. This is his chance. The villain is alone, defenseless, praying. He could strike now and end it all. His father would be avenged and Denmark freed from its corruption. And yet, Hamlet hesitates. If Claudius is praying, then his soul may be saved. Killing him now might send him to heaven, while his father's ghost still wanders in torment. No, he cannot allow that. He must wait for a moment when Claudius is in sin, when his soul is blackened and unrepentant. Only then will true justice be done. And so, Hamlet lowers his blade and slips away unseen. Claudius, still kneeling, is unaware of how close death came that night. But Hamlet's patience will soon lead him down a far bloodier path. The corridors of Elsinore are thick with secrecy, and the weight of suspicion grows heavier with each passing hour. Claudius, shaken by the events of the play, now sees Hamlet not merely as a troubled prince, but as a threat to his very rule. The king's mask of calm authority is slipping. He no longer asks whether Hamlet is mad. He knows that madness or not, Hamlet is dangerous. His guilt has been touched upon, and now his mind races with fear of exposure. He must act quickly. Yet even as Claudius schemes, Hamlet's fury has reached its peak. The truth of his father's murder, his mother's betrayal, and the corruption infecting Elsinore burns within him like fire. He is ready to confront the one person who might still hold some sway over him, Gertrude. His mother has sent for him, likely at Claudius's urging. But Hamlet does not approach this meeting as a son. He comes as an avenger, ready to make her see the full weight of her sins. But even as Hamlet prepares for this confrontation, another plot is unfolding. Polonius, ever the meddler, sees an opportunity to further ingratiate himself with Claudius. He decides he will hide behind the arras in Gertrude's chamber, eavesdropping on the conversation. If Hamlet reveals his true thoughts, Polonius will hear it and report back. He hides himself just before Hamlet arrives, concealed but not unnoticed by fate. The door swings open, and Hamlet enters. His presence alone shifts the air in the room. His mother stiffens, sensing the storm within him. She begins cautiously, chiding him for his outburst during the play. "Hamlet, thou hast thy father much offended," she says, her voice measured but firm. Hamlet's response is immediate and cutting. "Mother, you have my father much offended." Gertrude recoils at his words. There is an accusation in his tone, a weight that she does not want to face. She presses on, trying to reassert her authority. Come, come, you answer with an idle tongue." Hamlet steps closer, his eyes flashing. Go, go, you question with a wicked tongue." Gertrude's discomfort turns to anger. "Why, how now, Hamlet?" she exclaims, attempting to quell his rising emotions. But Hamlet is past the point of restraint. He grabs her by the arm. "What's the matter now?" he demands, his voice pressing against the air between them. Gertrude panics. Her son's intensity, his unpredictable behavior, she no longer recognizes him. Fear flickers in her eyes. "Have you forgot me?" she pleads, as if hoping the memory of her as his mother might soften his rage. Hamlet only tightens his grip. "No, by the rood, not so. You are the queen, your husband's brother's wife, and would it were not so, you are my mother." The venom in his words cuts deep. Gertrude attempts to escape his grasp. "Nay, then, I'll set those to you that can speak," she warns, threatening to call for help. Hamlet forces her onto a seat. Come and sit you down," he orders. "You shall not budge. You go not till I set you up a glass where you may see the inmost part of you." He means to strip away her illusions, to force her to see what she has done to his father, to Denmark, to herself. A sudden noise, a rustling behind the tapestry. Polonius, hidden behind the arras, has shifted. Perhaps he had hoped to slip away unnoticed, or perhaps he was simply reacting to the rising tension in the room. But Hamlet, already teetering on the edge of violence, hears the movement and reacts without thought. His sword is in his hand before a second breath can pass. He lunges, thrusting his blade through the heavy fabric, striking blindly at the unseen spy. A cry rings out. "Oh, I am slain." The weight of a body falls. Hamlet pulls back the tapestry, and there lies Polonius, his life's blood pooling beneath him, his mouth still frozen in shock. Gertrude gasps, her hand flying to her mouth in horror. Oh, what a rash and bloody deed is this! Hamlet looks down at the body with cold detachment. A bloody deed, he echoes. Almost as bad, good mother, as kill a king and marry with his brother. Gertrude's face pales. The accusation in his words is unmistakable. As kill a king, she repeats, her voice barely above a whisper. Aye, lady, it was my word, Hamlet confirms. The moment is charged with tension, but Hamlet does not linger on Polonius's death. He turns back to Gertrude, his fury undiminished. He gestures toward the portrait of Claudius, and then to the image of his father, forcing her to see the contrast. Look here upon this picture, and on this, he demands. The first, a noble and godlike king; the second, a lecherous villain who stole the throne. Have you eyes? He asks her. How could she choose Claudius over his father? How could she descend from greatness to corruption? Gertrude, overwhelmed, begins to weep. "O Hamlet, speak no more," she cries. "Thou turn'st mine eyes into my very soul." She sees the truth now. Her son has stripped away all pretense. But the night's horrors are not yet over. A chill fills the room. Hamlet's eyes widen. He sees something that Gertrude cannot. The ghost of King Hamlet stands before him once more. The specter's voice is gentle this time, a contrast to the fiery command of their first meeting. "Do not forget," he warns. He reminds Hamlet that his true purpose is to avenge, not to destroy his mother with cruelty. But to Gertrude, Hamlet appears to be speaking to empty air. She sees nothing. Her terror deepens. "Alas, he's mad," she cries. Hamlet shakes his head. "Do you see nothing there?" he asks desperately. "Nothing at all," she insists. The moment passes. The ghost vanishes. Hamlet turns back to his mother, his anger cooling but not gone. "I must to England," he tells her. "You know that." He has not been informed, but he senses Claudius's next move. The king, fearing what Hamlet knows, will not let him remain in Denmark. Before he leaves, he delivers one last warning. He pleads with Gertrude not to share a bed with Claudius that night, to resist the corruption she has allowed into her life. "Confess yourself to heaven," he urges her. Gertrude, shaken to her core, does not protest. A knock at the door. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern have come to escort Hamlet away. He leaves them with bitter words, knowing they are mere pawns in Claudius's game. Then, with one final look at Polonius's lifeless body, he drags the corpse away. The night is far from over. Blood has been spilled, and now there's no turning back. The halls of Elsinore are steeped in silence, but beneath that quiet, an undercurrent of danger flows unchecked. Polonius is dead, his blood soaking into the floorboards of Gertrude's chamber. But his death is not merely a personal tragedy, it is a political catastrophe. Hamlet has crossed a line that cannot be ignored, and Claudius, who had already seen the prince as a threat, now sees an opportunity. The murder of Polonius will serve as justification for removing Hamlet once and for all. But first, Hamlet must be found. Claudius, upon hearing of the murder, does not react with sorrow, but with calculation. He knows he must act swiftly. Polonius's body, hidden by Hamlet in the heat of the moment, is a liability. If the people of Denmark learn that their prince has killed the king's most trusted advisor, the court will be thrown into chaos. Claudius summons Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, his ever-willing informants, and commands them to find Hamlet and recover the body. His tone is urgent, but his mind is already working beyond the immediate crisis. Hamlet will not stay in Denmark, not if Claudius can help it. The prince's madness, real or feigned, will be his undoing. Meanwhile, Hamlet moves through the castle with an eerie calm. He he does not seem shaken by what he has done, nor does he make any attempt to flee. When Rosencrantz and Guildenstern confront him, demanding to know where he has hidden Polonius's body, he toys with them, speaking in riddles and half-truths. His words are sharp, mocking, revealing his growing disdain for these supposed friends who have so eagerly aligned themselves with the king. The body is with the king, he tells them cryptically, but the king is not with the body. They press him further, but Hamlet only smirks. A certain convocation of politic worms are at him. Even in the face of his own peril, he refuses to give them a straight answer. At last, Hamlet is brought before Claudius. The king's patience is wearing thin. He demands to know where Polonius's corpse has been placed, but Hamlet remains elusive. Not where he eats, he says, but where he is eaten. His words, laced with dark humor, emphasize the inevitable decay that comes for all men, king, counselor, or fool. Claudius, however, is in no mood for riddles. He knows he must take decisive action. He tells Hamlet that he is to leave Denmark immediately, bound for England. But what he does not say aloud, what lingers unspoken in the air between them, is that Hamlet will not be coming back. Claudius has already dispatched letters to the English court, ordering that the prince be executed upon arrival. Hamlet, though seemingly compliant, is no fool. He senses the danger behind Claudius's words, the cold calculation in his voice. But for now, he plays along. He bows, feigning obedience. "Farewell, dear mother," he says pointedly to Claudius. The king corrects him, he is his father now, but Hamlet does not relent. "Father and mother is man and wife," he says with a smirk. "Man and wife is one flesh, and so my mother." With that, he departs, leaving Claudius seething. Yet the storm brewing in Elsinore is far from over. While Claudius works to rid himself of Hamlet, another tragedy is unfolding. Ophelia, already reeling from Hamlet's erratic behavior, now faces an even crueler blow. Her father, Polonius, is dead, slain not in battle, not by accident, but by the very man she once loved. And worse, his body was not given the dignity of a proper burial, but hidden away as if his death were something to be ashamed of. Grief consumes Ophelia, but there is no solace for her. Her brother, Laertes, is far away in France. Claudius, ever the manipulator, will offer her no true comfort. Gertrude, too entangled in her own guilt and fears, does not intervene. And Hamlet, the source of her pain, is gone. With no one to anchor her, Ophelia begins to unravel. She wanders the halls, singing strange, broken songs, songs of love and loss, of death and betrayal. The court watches in uneasy silence. The girl who once embodied innocence now seems lost to madness. And in her vacant eyes, in the lilting melodies of her sorrowful ballads, there is a terrible inevitability. Meanwhile, Laertes has heard the news. Word of his father's sudden and ignoble death spreads quickly, and it reaches him in France like a dagger to the heart. But worse still is the rumor that follows, that the murderer was none other than Hamlet, the prince himself. Laertes is not a man to stand idly by in the face of such an outrage. He does not send letters. He does not wait for explanations. He sails immediately for Denmark, his heart burning with grief and vengeance. When he arrives, he does not enter the castle as a humble subject. He storms through the gates, rallying the people behind him. The court is in disarray. Claudius's rule, already fragile, now faces a new threat. Laertes demands justice. He demands to know why his father was slain, why his sister is driven mad with grief, why Hamlet still breathes. Claudius, though startled by the young man's fury, does not panic. He sees in Laertes an opportunity. If Hamlet returns, he will need more than a quiet execution. He will need a public justification for the prince's death. And what better way to ensure Hamlet's demise than by turning Laertes into his weapon? He speaks to the grieving son with measured words, feigning sympathy. He assures Laertes that he too mourns Polonius, that Hamlet's actions were reckless and unforgivable. But he urges patience. If Laertes truly seeks revenge, he must be clever. Let justice, not mere impulse, guide him. Laertes, blinded by rage, listens. Claudius has planted the seed, and soon it will bloom into something deadly. The pieces are moving. Hamlet sails toward England, unaware of the orders that will seal his fate. Ophelia drifts further into madness, slipping beyond the reach of those who might save her. Laertes sharpens his thirst for vengeance, his grief twisting into something that Claudius can mold to his advantage. And Claudius, calculating, relentless, tightens his grip on Elsinore. But even the best laid plans can go awry. For what Claudius does not yet know, what he cannot yet foresee, is that Hamlet's journey will not end in England. The prince will return. And when he does, he will bring the storm with him. The sea stretches endlessly before Hamlet as he sails toward England. But though the waters around him seem calm, the storm within him rages on. He knows that Claudius has sent him away not out of mercy, but out of fear. And that fear, Hamlet suspects, is reason enough to be wary. He does not trust the king's intentions, nor does he believe that this journey will end in anything but treachery. His suspicions are soon confirmed when he stumbles upon the letters Claudius has sent with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, letters that contain his own death sentence. Claudius has ordered that upon Hamlet's arrival in England, the English king should execute him without delay. There is no trial, no discussion, only death. Hamlet, however, is not so easily outmaneuvered. He seizes the opportunity to turn the tables. Under cover of night, he alters the contents of the letter, replacing his own name with those of his false friends. Now, it is Rosencrantz and Guildenstern who will meet their deaths upon reaching England, while Hamlet will find his own way home. Fate, as it happens, is on his side. Before the ship reaches its destination, it is attacked by pirates. In the chaos of battle, Hamlet boards the enemy vessel, and in a strange twist of fortune, the pirates spare his life. Seeing his value as a prince of Denmark, they agree to return him to his homeland. Thus, while Claudius believes Hamlet is safely out of the way, the prince is, in truth, making his way back to Elsinore, armed with the knowledge that his uncle has attempted to have him murdered. But Hamlet is not the only one returning to Denmark. In Elsinore, grief has driven Ophelia beyond the brink of reason. She wanders the castle in a daze, speaking in riddles and songs, the sorrow of her father's death and Hamlet's betrayal too much for her fragile mind to bear. The court watches helplessly as the once innocent maiden dissolves into madness, a tragic reflection of the rot at the heart of Denmark. Her songs are filled with haunting meanings, references to lost love, to betrayal, to death. She gives out flowers, each one symbolizing a bitter truth. To Claudius, she offers rue, a plant associated with repentance. To Gertrude, she gives fennel and columbines, symbols of infidelity. Her words, though fragmented, carry a terrible clarity. Then, As swiftly as a shadow passing over the land, she is gone. Ophelia drowns. Whether she falls into the water by accident, lost in her madness, or whether she chooses to let the river claim her is left uncertain. But the result is the same. Her body is pulled under, and when it is found, it is too late. The girl who once embodied purity and hope has become yet another victim of the corruption that has taken root in Denmark. When Lertz learns of his sister's death, his grief is beyond words. He has already lost his father, and now Ophelia too has been taken from him. His sorrow hardens into something else, rage, raw and unforgiving. He no longer merely seeks justice for Polonius. He seeks vengeance, complete and absolute. And Claudius, ever the manipulator, knows how to use this fury to his advantage. With careful words, he convinces Lertz that Hamlet alone is to blame. He feeds the young man's anger, directing it like a blade toward the returning prince. But Lertz is not a fool. He knows that if he is to take revenge, he must do so in a way that leaves no room for failure. Together, Claudius and Lertz devise a plan. They will challenge Hamlet to a duel, but this will not be a simple contest of skill. Lertz will fight with an unbaited sword, one sharpened and tipped with poison. Even a scratch will be enough to kill the prince. And if, by some chance, Hamlet evades the poisoned blade, Claudius will have another trap waiting. He will offer Hamlet a drink, one laced with deadly venom. One way or another, Hamlet will not leave the duel alive. Even as these plots unfold, Hamlet finally returns to Denmark. But he does not return with the fanfare of a prince. He does not enter the castle immediately. Instead, he and his friend Horatio find themselves in the graveyard, where an old gravedigger is at work. The sight is both morbid and strangely fitting. In the hands of the gravedigger, a skull is unearthed and tossed carelessly aside, nothing more than a relic of the past. Hamlet picks it up and studies it. The skull belongs to Yorick, the court jester from his childhood, a man he once knew and loved. Now, all that remains is bone. The moment is profound. Here, in this silent graveyard, Hamlet confronts the truth that has lingered at the edge of his thoughts for so long. Death is the great equalizer. Kings and jesters alike return to dust. Power, ambition, love, betrayal, none of it matters in the face of mortality. But before Hamlet can linger too long in his thoughts, a procession approaches. He watches in silence as Ophelia's funeral unfolds before him, and his heart breaks anew. Lertz, consumed by grief, leaps into Ophelia's grave, clutching his sister's lifeless body, cursing the heavens for taking her from him. And Hamlet, unable to remain hidden any longer, steps forward. His emotions, long kept in check, now surge forth. "I loved Ophelia," he declares, his voice trembling with pain. 40,000 brothers could not, with all their quantity of love, make up my sum. Lertz, seeing Hamlet before him, seeing the man he holds responsible for everything he has lost, erupts in fury. He attacks the prince, and for a moment, the grave itself becomes a battlefield. The two are separated, but the hatred between them is undeniable. Claudius watches from the sidelines, knowing that his plan is falling into place. The duel will happen. The trap is set. Hamlet, however, is no longer the hesitant young man he once was. He has returned to Elsinore with a sense of certainty. His brush with death at sea, his reflections in the graveyard, and his realization of Claudius's treachery have stripped away his doubts. He knows now that he cannot delay any longer. The time for indecision is over. The end game is approaching. As he walks back toward the castle, toward the fate that awaits him, Hamlet is at peace with one thing: he will see this through. The duel is coming, and in its wake, there will be no more illusions, no more plots in the shadows, only the truth and death. The sun hangs low over Elsinore, casting long shadows across the castle's stone corridors. Hamlet has returned, but the Denmark he once knew is beyond saving. His father is gone, Ophelia is dead, Laertes is burning with vengeance, and Claudius sits on the throne, his grip on power as strong as ever. Yet Hamlet no longer feels lost in hesitation. His mind is sharpened, his resolve hardened. He knows what he must do. Claudius, ever the strategist, wastes no time. He greets Hamlet with feigned warmth, masking his true intentions behind a cordial invitation. A friendly duel, he proposes, between Hamlet and Laertes, a test of skill, a gesture of reconciliation. The court will gather to watch, and the king himself will see to it that the event is conducted with the highest honors. But Hamlet is no fool. He knows there is treachery in the air, yet he does not refuse. Whether by steel or by strategy, he will see this through to the end. The game is set, and Hamlet, despite knowing it is rigged, is ready to play. Before the duel, Hamlet speaks with Horatio, the one person in the court he can still trust. Horatio urges caution, sensing the dangers lurking beneath the surface of Claudius's proposal. But Hamlet, in a rare moment of acceptance, simply nods. There is a special providence in the fall of a sparrow, he says. If it be now, 'tis not to come; if it be not to come, it will be now. He is no longer afraid. If death awaits him, he will meet it without fear. The great hall of Elsinore is prepared for the duel. Courtiers gather, their murmurs filling the air as they take their seats. At the center, a long table is laid out with fine goblets of wine, one of which, unbeknownst to Hamlet, holds the poison Claudius has prepared as a final safeguard. The king watches, his expression unreadable, as Hamlet and Laertes step forward. Laertes stands stiffly, his face cold with grief and fury. He does not offer words, only a sharp nod as he takes his rapier in hand. Hamlet, in contrast, remains poised, even extending an apology before the fight begins. He speaks earnestly, admitting that he has wronged Laertes, that if his actions seemed cruel, they were the product of madness. But Laertes, though he listens, does not let his anger subside. He accepts Hamlet's apology in words, but his heart still demands revenge. The duel begins. The two men circle each other, swords raised. The first exchange is cautious, a testing of skill. The rapiers clash, quick and sharp, and Hamlet scores the first hit. The crowd erupts in polite applause, and Claudius, ever the actor, lifts a goblet of wine in mock celebration. He offers the cup to Hamlet, urging him to drink. But Hamlet, caught in the moment, declines. "Not yet," he says. "I'll play this bout first." The duel continues. Hamlet, despite having been away from courtly games, proves himself a formidable opponent. He scores another hit. Laertes, growing more desperate, realizes that time is slipping away. Claudius watches with increasing unease. His carefully crafted scheme is not unfolding as smoothly as he hoped. And then, in a moment of cold resolve, Laertes breaks the rules. As Hamlet lunges forward, Laertes strikes not with skill, but with intent, slashing at Hamlet's flesh with the poisoned blade. The cut is shallow, but the venom is enough. The trap has sprung. Yet fate is cruel in its irony. As Hamlet, stunned by the wound, regains his footing, a struggle ensues. In the chaos, the rapiers are exchanged unintentionally, unknowingly. Laertes now holds Hamlet's untarnished sword, while Hamlet, by sheer chance, wields the poisoned blade. The fight resumes, and before Laertes can react, Hamlet strikes him with the very weapon meant to ensure his demise. Laertes staggers, his breath catching in his throat. He knows at that moment that he is as doomed as the man he sought to kill. The court is thrown into disarray, but before anyone can act, a new horror unfolds. Gertrude, in an attempt to toast her son's success, lifts the poisoned goblet and drinks deeply. Claudius sees it happen, but he is powerless to stop her. Within moments, she gasps, her face twisting with pain. The venom spreads swiftly through her body. She turns to Hamlet, her voice weak. The drink. "I am poisoned," she manages to whisper before she collapses to the floor. Panic grips the room. The queen is dying, Laertes is fatally wounded, and Hamlet feels the creeping burn of the poison in his own veins. The air is thick with betrayal. Claudius, the architect of it all, remains frozen until Laertes, in his final moments, summons the last of his strength to expose the truth. The king's to blame," he gasps. Hamlet, despite the poison coursing through his body, does not hesitate. His eyes, burning with fury and clarity, lock onto Claudius. The time for hesitation is over. He seizes the poisoned sword and drives it into the king, ensuring that he too will not escape this reckoning. But Hamlet does not stop there. He takes the goblet, the very instrument of his mother's death, and forces it upon Claudius, making him drink his own poison. The king chokes, sputters, and collapses. His reign, his crimes end in an instant. Silence falls over Elsinore. The court watches in stunned disbelief. The man they called king is gone. The queen is gone. Laertes, struggling to breathe, turns to Hamlet with a flicker of understanding. "Exchange forgiveness with me, noble Hamlet," he whispers. "Mine and my father's death come not upon thee, nor thine on me." Hamlet, his strength fading, kneels beside his mother's lifeless body. Horatio rushes to his side, his face etched with sorrow. He sees what is happening. Hamlet will not survive this. The prince, his vision blurring, speaks his final wishes. He asks Horatio to tell his story, to set the record straight, to let the world know what truly happened in Denmark. Horatio, overcome with grief, nearly follows Hamlet into death. He lifts the poisoned cup, ready to drink, but Hamlet stops him. "Give me the cup," he murmurs. "Let it go." He grips Horatio's hand, his voice weakening. "If thou didst ever hold me in thy heart, absent thee from felicity a while, and in this harsh world draw thy breath in pain to tell my story." His final words come with a sense of finality. The rest is silence. Hamlet dies, and in the echo of that silence, the fate of Denmark hangs in uncertainty. Fortinbras, the Prince of Norway, arrives to find the court littered with the dead. Horatio, now the sole keeper of Hamlet's tale, steps forward to speak the truth. The cycle of betrayal, revenge, and tragedy has ended. But at what cost? Elsinore stands, but the house of Denmark has fallen. The great hall of Elsinore lies in ruin. The air is thick with the scent of death, and the once grand court now resembles a battlefield. The bodies of the royal family, Hamlet, Gertrude, Claudius, and Laertes, are scattered across the cold stone floor, victims of their own schemes, betrayals, and thirst for vengeance. The Danish nobility, who had gathered to witness what they believed to be a mere duel, are left in stunned silence. No king remains to rule. No clear heir stands to claim the throne. Denmark is leaderless, vulnerable, its future hanging by a thread. Amid the carnage, Horatio alone remains standing, the last true witness to all that has transpired. His grief is immeasurable, but he cannot afford to fall into despair. He remembers Hamlet's final request to live to tell his story, to ensure that the truth of Elsinore's downfall is not lost to rumor and deception. Before Horatio can act, the arrival of Fortinbras, the Prince of Norway, shatters the fragile quiet. He enters Elsinore with his forces, expecting to find a kingdom prepared for war, a Denmark standing against invasion. Instead, he is met with devastation. The Danish court, once a place of power and intrigue, is reduced to a scene of unspeakable tragedy. He stands among the dead, his soldiers at his back, and for a moment he can only stare. This was not the victory he anticipated. Where is this sight? Fortinbras demands. His voice, though steady, carries the weight of disbelief. He has come as an outsider, as a conqueror, but he now finds himself heir to an empty throne, a kingdom already destroyed from within. It is Horatio who steps forward, still shaken but resolved. He knows what must be done. "What is it you would see?" he asks. "If aught of woe or wonder, cease your search." He gestures to the bodies. This is Denmark's end. Fortinbras, though a foreign prince, understands the gravity of the moment. He sees the fallen figures, recognizes the regal bearing of the young man who lies still upon the ground. And though he never knew Hamlet personally, he senses something profound in his passing. "This quarry cries on havoc," he murmurs. "O proud death, what feast is toward in thine eternal cell, that thou so many princes at a shot so bloodily hast struck?" Horatio nods. He knows that Fortinbras deserves more than fragments of understanding. He must hear the full tale, the truth of Claudius's treachery, of Hamlet's tragic path, of how Denmark fell not by war but by corruption, by the rot that festered in its own court. "Give order that these bodies high on a stage be placed to the view," Horatio insists. "And let me speak to TH, yet unknowing world how these things came about." Fortinbras listens, and as the weight of the story unfolds, his demeanor shifts. He is not here merely as a conqueror. He recognizes the gravity of the events that led to this moment. He sees in Hamlet not just a fallen prince, but a figure of tragedy, a man caught in forces beyond his control, doomed by the sins of those who came before him. A funeral procession is ordered. The fallen prince, the last of Denmark's royal line, will not be discarded as a casualty of intrigue, but honored as a nobleman whose life was stolen by fate. Hamlet, whose journey was one of indecision and philosophical torment, will find in death the recognition that eluded him in life. "Let 4 captains bear Hamlet like a soldier to the stage," Fortinbras declares. For he was likely, had he been put on, to have proved most royal. There is something solemn in his tone, not mere formality, but genuine respect. A man he never knew will now be honored by his command. Horatio stands by as the orders are carried out, his heart heavy yet resolute. He has fulfilled Hamlet's final wish. He has ensured that the prince's story will not be twisted into rumor, that Denmark's tragedy will not be buried with the dead. As Hamlet's body is carried away, cannons fire in salute. The echoes of their thunder roll across the castle grounds, signaling the final act of a story that began with a ghost's whisper and ended with a kingdom undone. Denmark belongs to Fortinbras now, but it is not the kingdom it once was. It is a shadow of its former self, a testament to the destruction wrought by ambition, betrayal, and revenge. The cycle is complete. The old world has been wiped away. What comes next is uncertain, but for now, the only thing left is silence. The cannon's echoes fade into the vast sky over Elsinore, and in their wake, an eerie stillness settles over the ruined court. The dead have been gathered, their pale faces stark against the cold stone, and the nobles of Denmark whisper among themselves, uncertain of what is to come. A foreign prince now stands in their hall, claiming dominion over their land. Yet there is no resistance, only resignation. Denmark has already fallen, not by the sword of an enemy, but by the corruption within. Fortinbras surveys the scene, his sharp eyes taking in the remnants of a kingdom that has devoured itself from the inside out. He had prepared for battle, expecting to seize Denmark in combat, but instead, he has walked into a court where every ruler has perished by their own design. His soldiers stand at attention, awaiting his orders, but even they seem unnerved by the weight of the moment. This is not a victory, it is an inheritance of ghosts. At the center of it all, Horatio remains. He stands amidst the bodies, the sole survivor of Hamlet's tragic circle, the only man left who truly understands the events that have unfolded. The burden of telling the story rests upon him, and he knows that history will not be kind unless he speaks the truth. There will be rumors, distortions, and those who seek to twist what has happened for their own ends. But Hamlet had trusted him with his final wish, and Horatio will not fail him. He steps forward, addressing Fortinbras directly. His voice is steady, but the weight of grief lingers in every word. Let me speak to TH, yet unknowing world how these things came about, he insists, determined that Denmark's fall will not be reduced to mere political maneuvering. So shall you hear of carnal, bloody, and unnatural acts, of accidental judgments, casual slaughters, of deaths put on by cunning and forced cause. And in this upshot, purposes mistook fallen on TH inventors' heads. Fortinbras listens intently, nodding as he begins to grasp the full scope of the tragedy. He had known of King Hamlet's death, had heard whispers of Claudius's ascension, but he had not known the rot that lay beneath the surface, the murder, the deception, the madness, the vengeance that had driven Denmark to the brink. And yet, even knowing all of this, there is no triumph in his heart. He has not conquered a kingdom, he has merely stepped into a tomb. With the weight of history upon them, orders are given. The bodies of the fallen must be prepared for burial, and Hamlet, the last prince of Denmark, will be honored as a soldier. 4 captains lift his body, carrying him away as the nobles watch in silent reverence. Though he died young, though he was plagued by hesitation, though his fate was written in tragedy, there is no doubt that he was a man of consequence. As they leave, Horatio lingers a moment longer, his gaze resting upon the empty throne. It had been Claudius's seat of power, the place where corruption festered, where the fate of Denmark was sealed. Now, it stands abandoned, a symbol of all that has been lost. Perhaps this is justice in its own way. Perhaps Denmark was always meant to burn itself out, to be wiped clean, so that something new might rise in its place. But Horatio does not linger on these thoughts for long. He has a duty now, not to the throne, not to power, but to memory. He must leave Elsinore, travel beyond its walls, and carry Hamlet's story with him. tale must be told, and he will be its keeper. As he steps away, the castle seems smaller, its halls emptier than ever before. The age of Hamlet is over. Denmark belongs to a new ruler now, but the ghosts of the past will never truly fade. The last echoes of the cannons drift into silence, and with them, the story of Denmark's fall nears its end. The bodies have been taken from the Hall Hamlet, Gertrude, Claudius, Laertes, all laid upon their final resting places, their fates sealed by the same forces of treachery and revenge that had consumed Elsinore from the beginning. The Danish court remains in stunned quiet, as if the very walls of the castle mourn the tragedy that has unfolded within them. Fortinbras stands as the last ruler left standing, a foreign prince inheriting a kingdom not through conquest, but through absence. Denmark, once a strong and noble land, now lies in ruin, leaderless, its royal bloodline erased in a single night of violence. There is no celebration, no triumph, only the cold reality that power has shifted once again, and that the weight of history now rests on new shoulders. Horatio remains, grief-stricken but resolved. He is the last true witness to Hamlet's life and death, the one who carries the burden of memory. He knows that the story must be told, not just the politics of it, not just the tragedy of a royal family's collapse, but the full truth of Hamlet's struggle. He was not merely a prince consumed by vengeance. He was a man caught between action and hesitation, a thinker tormented by the weight of fate, a son desperate to right the wrongs of the past. In a world of schemes and deception, he sought clarity, and in the end, he found it only in death. As the fallen are prepared for burial, Fortinbras turns to Horatio, acknowledging the gravity of his task. Though he may be the new ruler of Denmark, it is Horatio who holds its past. Bear Hamlet like a soldier to the stage, Fortinbras declares, ensuring that the last prince of Denmark will be honored, even in death. There is an unspoken understanding between them. Fortinbras sees in Hamlet a fallen equal, a ruler who might have been great had fate allowed it. There is no gloating, no self-congratulation, only the recognition of loss. The procession begins. Hamlet, whose life had been filled with uncertainty and indecision, now moves toward his final rest with the dignity of a warrior. He had fought, in his own way, against the forces that sought to destroy him. And though he fell, he ensured that the truth was known, that the lies of the court were burned away, leaving only reality behind. The court watches as the last of Denmark's royalty is carried away, marking the true end of an era. Horatio lingers a moment longer. He is now alone in a world that has been reshaped by death, but his purpose remains clear. He will tell Hamlet's story. He will ensure that history does not twist it into something lesser, something false. The truth will survive, even as Denmark moves forward under new rule. As the soldiers fire their final salute, the weight of Hamlet's last words lingers in the air. The rest is silence. And with that, the tale of Hamlet, Prince of Denmark, comes to its tragic end.